Spotlight is proudly sponsored by HEC Media, St. Louis's home for arts, education, and culture.
Today on Spotlight, how your 4th of July celebration might be very similar to how St. Louisans did it in the early 1800s. Plus, a large donation will allow researchers to study several neurodegenerative diseases. And then what WashU has to do with the mystery that surrounds the Declaration of Independence. But first, if you've been to Busch Stadium, you may have already enjoyed the work of this talented artist. It's Sunday, and you're watching the multiple Emmy Award-winning Spotlight.
At the end of a long gravel road in the woods of Warren County, Missouri, Harry Weber sits in solitude, giving a bear some relief.
Artwork is work, yeah.
And for more than a quarter century, the work has been steady. Harry Weber grew up in St. Louis, studied English, art, and drama at Princeton, and served with distinction in the Navy during the Vietnam War. When he returned to civilian life, Weber started working as a marketing consultant, but he always felt himself drawn to something else.
I draw all the time. My wife and I were both professional horse people, and somebody asked me to do a sculpture of a foxhound, and found out, yeah, that's pretty easy. I enjoyed doing that, and that's where the sculpture started. The big break was the Cardinals in 1997. Started those statues outside Busch Stadium and asked me to do them, because I said, you know, you may find more accomplished sculptors, but you're not going to find anybody that likes movement better than I do, and what moves better than a ball player.
Weber went on to sculpt dozens of busts for the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame, along with the iconic Lewis and Clark statue on the St. Louis riverfront, the Chuck Berry statue in the Delmar Loop, and the statue of Dred and Harriet Scott in downtown St. Louis.
I like sculptures that portray the veracity of a moment, you know, both physically and emotionally. You try to imagine what's going through their mind at that moment and try to capture that. And that's what makes it fun. The problem with it is sometimes you get working on things, and I think this is true of musicians, writers, or anything. You almost get hypnotized by your own work. And you think, oh, you know, this is great. I'm really moving along here. Then you walk in through the door the first thing the next morning and go, oh, God, you know, how did I fool myself into doing that? And you basically start all over again.
As of 2023, Harry Weber has created more than 150 sculptures displayed in more than 100 public locations. Half are in St. Louis, and those numbers continue to grow.
I am an octogenarian. Saying you're 81 has a lot more panache than saying I'm in my 70s. No thoughts of retirement, no. Thoughts of just getting more work. I like to eat. We had an 8-month period with nothing to do. And I was beginning to think, well, you know, my career is over. We had proposals all over the place, requested from people. And then all of a sudden, 6 hit at once. So I'm working on 6 big things. And that's the way it works. It's, you know, peaks and valleys. But that was a pretty terrifying valley for a while.
And now there has been an exhilarating peak. On June 21st, 2023, Harry Weber was given a star on the St. Louis Walk of Fame.
I often say that I live in the reflected glory of my subject matter. And it is true that they don't do statues of dull people. It makes an interesting job even more interesting in that I've gotten to know or know about more than 100 of the more interesting people that ever existed on the planet. I was amazed. I was astounded. Here I've made a career of honoring people, and I get honored for honoring people. It's great. It's a super turnaround.
For his service in the Navy, Harry Weber was awarded the Bronze Star for Valor. Now he's been awarded a Brass Star for being, in a manner of speaking, a Bronze Star.
I just like the work. It is fun to get up in the morning and go work on something. And it doesn't matter if anybody else recognizes it or not. The real trick is to know when you're doing your best work. The real trick is to know when that thing that you just did meets your standards. I don't care about anybody else's. Of course I care about what they think, but the main one is, am I pleased with it?
You can find the stories featured in today's show along with past episodes and more at hecmedia.org/spotlight. History Spotlight, brought to you by HEC Media and the Missouri Historical Society.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jody Sowell, President of the Missouri Historical Society in St. Louis, and this is History Spotlight. St. Louisans love celebrating the 4th of July with barbecues, parades, and of course, fireworks. Historical records show little change from the first Independence Day picnics held following the Louisiana Purchase to the more recent Celebrate St. Louis. Chris Gordon, MHS Director of Library and Collections, explains how St. Louisans have always loved celebrating our nation's birthday.
St. Louisans love to celebrate the 4th of July. The earliest 4th of July celebrations go all the way back to the early 19th century, right after the conclusion of the Louisiana Purchase. People would gather to celebrate Independence Day in many ways the way we do today, in picnics and celebrations and so forth. Typically in the early 19th century, there were many organized banquets or very large picnics on the 4th of July. And they tended to include toasts. There would be all kinds of speeches by politicians and prominent individuals talking about the story of independence, usually extolling the virtues of men like George Washington. And every time that they would talk about these individuals, they would stop and they would toast to these individuals. They would often shoot off cannons, sometimes between each toast. There were 4th of July parades. Often these parades were organized by the local fire companies. Before 1858, when the municipal fire department was founded, there were independent private fire departments. And these were kind of like fraternal organizations. So they would dress up in their uniforms, they would have big 4th of July parades and picnics. And then as the years progress, you start to see fireworks included in these 4th of July celebrations. And it's pretty interesting, in the late 1900s, in order to control the use of fireworks in the city, because obviously then as of now, they're a fire hazard, you actually had to go down to City Hall and get a permit if you wanted to fire off fireworks in front of your home. They were also having larger and larger events at places like Creve Coeur Lake. Much more of what you consider modern celebrations, with families coming out, spending the day at the park, bringing picnic baskets and things like that you see today. There were many notable 4th of July events, including a 4th of July event at the 1904 World's Fair. There was a parade through the fairgrounds. Then later on, we see events such as Fair St. Louis. And this is established in the late 1960s through the more modern era, where you see things like air shows that are included and bands. And then every suburban area would have their own individual parades through places like Webster Groves and Kirkwood as well. So St. Louis has always had a very vibrant 4th of July celebration history that continues to this day.
Next week on History Spotlight, explore the rich stories behind children's clothing and how these garments connect to culture, identity, and history.
To learn more about the Missouri Historical Society, visit mohistory.org.
HEC Media. Recognized, celebrated, honored time and again for excellence in the industry. HEC Media has been bringing home the hardware for over a decade. Arts and education to author talks, magazine shows and documentaries, individual craft achievements to overall excellence. Find all of the award-winning content at hecmedia.org.
having tremendous success on groundbreaking work with neurological diseases. More is on the horizon for C2N Diagnostics.
C2N Diagnostics is a St. Louis-based company that's developing molecular diagnostic tools to aid in the evaluation of patients that are dealing with cognitive concerns. The primary focus for the company historically has been Alzheimer's disease and related dementias.
C2N Diagnostics developed a blood test for Alzheimer's disease called Pressivity AD2,
aimed at trying to help individuals that are experiencing new signs or symptoms of cognitive decline. Recently, we had an important publication that showed when clinicians use this blood test, they can actually improve their diagnostic certainty and confidence in a diagnosis, and also use the test information to choose the appropriate medications or the appropriate management plan more confidently than they did before.
The Pressivity AD2 blood test is successfully testing for blood biomarkers in Alzheimer's disease, measuring amyloid beta and tau protein ratios.
Pressivity AD2 test is a blood test that actually measures the core biomarkers or the core pathologies of Alzheimer's disease. And that really is speaking to amyloid pathology and also neurofibrillary tau tangles that will infer the probability of amyloid pathology in the brain. Having a blood test that can perform in many ways the same as these CSF measurements or PET scans really represents an incredible innovation that helps bring a much more simplistic approach, that being a blood test, to being able to address the concerns for patients really regardless of location, socioeconomic status.
And now, the St. Louis company introduces the diagnostic technology in the fight against Parkinson's disease.
To try to understand more about some of the underlying contributors to disease in Parkinson's, in many ways it's not as advanced as we've come for being able to diagnose Alzheimer's disease.
And there may be no better way than teaming up with an organization leading the fight to eliminate the disease, the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research.
The Michael J. Fox Foundation partnership represents a really creative collaboration between the leading foundation in the world that's focused on trying to understand the underlying causes of Parkinson's disease.
The hope is to uncover new links between Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and other neurological diseases. The Michael J. Fox Foundation's grant of over $1.5 million to C2N will allow researchers to connect research fluid samples and novel fluid biomarker test results to better understand the interplay between the diseases.
Start applying some of the tools that we've developed for Alzheimer's disease to now start characterizing whether individuals that have Parkinson's or mixed dementia types like frontotemporal dementia may actually have some coexistent pathology that you can find in people that have Alzheimer's disease.
The research from this partnership can help with early detection of both Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's, and can help with the development of new approaches to treatments and prevention,
which is really going to be predicated upon the availability of highly accurate biomarkers that can help identify the disease process even before symptoms have begun. Then you can get into some very creative strategies for long-term prevention. And that's what really excites us. It's what excites the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and it's what excites other organizations around the world that are focused on not only Alzheimer's disease, but also Parkinson's, ALS, and other conditions that represent neurodegenerative biological complex processes that begin many, many years before people begin to manifest symptoms.
Later on Spotlight, a violin maker who uses the same techniques as the great masters.
Most people, when they think about the Declaration of Independence, they think about the handwritten document that's on display in the National Archives, and they have this picture in mind. There's this painting where they're showing all of the founding fathers signing this document. That's not what happened on July 4th.
More than a year after the outbreak of the Revolutionary War, on July 4, 1776, Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence to formally announce the creation of a new sovereign nation, the United States of America. That evening, Congress directed John Dunlap, a printer in Philadelphia, to print 200 copies.
And that was sent throughout the colonies to Great Britain, to all of the generals, to let them know that this had happened. One of these copies arrived in Rhode Island, where Solomon Southwick, who was a printer there, printed 29 more copies.
One of these copies, known as the Southwick Broadside, is on display at the Washington University Olin Library. These copies were created to squelch rumors running rampant throughout the colonies during the war.
They print them because it's a lot faster than handwriting, and it's also an official document. So these would be read in town squares by ministers or town officials. So you have somebody with an official standing reading this official document so they can say, this is what's real, this is the true news, not these rumors that you've been hearing.
The handwritten signed Declaration of Independence on display in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. wasn't created until after the broadside copies were distributed, with the earliest signatures made on August 2, 1776. Unlike this written version on parchment paper, the broadside copies, printed on laid paper, were not intended to last.
This is a very ephemeral document. Broadsides are printed only on one side, which is why it's called a broadside, and they were usually hung in a town square, on a church door, somewhere like that, and then tossed away. Once everybody knew the news, you didn't have to keep them anymore. So we're very lucky that some of these have survived.
How this particular copy survived is a bit of a mystery.
It survived somehow from the 18th century through 1941, where we pick up its history. We know that it had been folded at one point, so it's very possible that somebody folded it up, stuck it in an attic somewhere, and then forgot about it, or passed it down through the generations. And it was bought by the Newman family in 1941, and the Newman family very generously donated the document to us.
The document was donated to Washington University in 2015. On display alongside this historic document is a beloved collection of one of our founding fathers.
Throughout his lifetime, Thomas Jefferson built 3 libraries. The first one was lost in a fire. The second one was sold to the Library of Congress in order to pay his debts. And everybody's probably familiar with that famous line, "I cannot live without books." That had happened after he sold his collection to the Library of Congress, and he's sitting in his empty library saying, I've got to get more books again. And so that's his 3rd library that he collects. After his death, he had a lot of debt again, I think because of the book buying. So they sold that collection. Now, Joseph Coolidge had married Thomas Jefferson's granddaughter, and she convinced Joseph Coolidge to buy some of these books back from Jefferson, including one that he had given to him. So he ended up buying this book twice. Eventually, Joseph Coolidge's collection was donated to WashU in 1885. And those books actually went into the circulating collection for the most part, and they were available for circulation, for study, for students to check out and take home. And then in 2010, there was a scholar working on a biography of Ellen Coolidge who realized what had happened, that Joseph Coolidge's library had come to WashU. She called up some of the people here in special collections and said, you might want to check this out. Can you see if some of these are Thomas Jefferson's? And they were able to rescue those from the circulating collection, bring them into special collections, and identify them as Thomas Jefferson's books. Here's his signature. So instead of signing his books in the front of the book like most people did, Thomas Jefferson went to the I signature and put a T in front of it, because in the Latin alphabet there is no J.
To learn more, visit library.wustl.edu.
The University of Missouri in Columbia was established in 1839. It was the first public university west of the Mississippi, made possible by the 1803 Louisiana Purchase, acquired during Thomas Jefferson's presidency. Jefferson's impact on the university was so profound that his original tombstone lies in the middle of the campus.
If you've ever been to Forest Park, chances are you've seen this. But did you ever stop and wonder just what it is and why it's there?
Behind me is the Nathan Frank Bandstand.
The bandstand was built in 1876, the same year Forest Park opened, and was used as a venue for musicians to hold public concerts. It was renovated for the 1904 World's Fair and remained in use for several years after.
Early part of the 1900s, that bandstand, which was made of wood, suffered from both weather, from fires, and in around 1910, 1911, it was actually closed down because it was not thought to be safe.
The site then stood empty. That is, until 1924, when a man by the name of Nathan Frank came along.
Nathan Frank was a prominent St. Louisan. He also was one of the people that helped to bring the World's Fair to St. Louis in 1904.
Nathan Frank was also one of the earliest supporters of Forest Park and one of its earliest benefactors, donating about $50,000 to build the bandstand we see today. This new bandstand is slightly less ornate than the original. It's made of marble rather than wood to cut down on the chances of future fires. And while it's no longer used by musicians, it remains to this day one of the jewels of Forest Park.
Go to hecmedia.org for the arts and authors,
Completely accidental because I never set out to write a book.
science and history, culture and community,
It's considered to be the oldest organic farm west of the Mississippi.
education, films,
Finding the coin places the site firmly in the 13th century.
what's happening now around St. Louis, and more. See for yourself at hecmedia.org.
I started playing the violin like right after high school, and because we had one laying around the house, my dad played a little bit. Sometimes it'll just take you. It's such a weird, mysterious instrument, and I just totally got into it. And then I thought, I've always done stuff with my hands. I used to work on cars. I used to paint cars and do kinds of things like that. And so I could work with my hands, and I thought, well, maybe I could do that. I made my first violin in 1978. So I've been doing it a pretty long time, 45 years almost or something like that. Just never really stopped learning, to be honest with you. The great violins were made by makers like Antonio Stradivari and Giuseppe Guarneri, and these are makers that were in northern Italy in the late 1600s, early 1700s. They basically perfected the shape of the instrument. There's some principles, there's some like physical principles too. Like there's flexibility, like all the pieces need to be flexible, but they need to be strong too so that they don't fall apart. So you have to kind of hit this kind of intersection of strength and flexibility. If you hit that target close to the center, you're going to get a great violin. To make a violin for me takes 300 to 400 hours. Everything kind of starts with a pattern like this. This is basically the inside shape of a violin, and you can kind of see it just fits in there like this is the pattern. This is how it starts. We basically start with a piece of wood, like a full piece of wood like this. This is two pieces of wood joined together in the middle, and so it's been cut out of that piece of wood like that. As you can see, a gouge like this puts really deep flutes in it. So then we have, after we get going, we have this little thing called a finger plane, and the finger plane smooths out the grooves. It'll end up looking kind of like this. So this is a plate after we've done this to it, the finger plane. The next comes the scraper. So the scraper will take the flutes from the finger plane out and smooth it down. So after we're done with that, we turn over and we use the chisel on the inside of it, and then it becomes like that. And this is kind of a semi-finished. But now you can really hear it. Listen to that. It's already just getting really loud. So that's kind of how we make the top and the back. The sides are another story. The sides are actually thin pieces of wood that are bent on a hot iron. So this is a thin piece of wood that was flat, and then we dip it in water and we pull it on a hot iron and we bend it. And as you can see, it's this shape right in here. So this is the back and sides, and then This is kind of how the box will be made. So then this will be the top here. So this is all just roughed out, but you can kind of see this starting to take shape as the violin. And we move on to the neck, and the neck is like, you take a block of wood and you trace out the rough pattern of the neck and saw that out. And here's a finished scroll, so you can kind of see how that's narrowed down. This is the peg box that's hollowed out, and then of course the scroll is carved. We carve that we do that all by hand, and then that'll be set into the body of the box, and then we're getting pretty close to having it done. I do feel a connection to the makers of old. I'm doing it kind of the way that they did it. I have electric lights, and I have other, I have heat and things that they didn't have, so much of. Of course, they had wood heat or whatever. It's kind of, a lot of it's the same. It's the same kind of, when you chisel the wood, it's the same sound. It's the same. There's a lot of the same stuff. One has to remember, tone is subjective. So what I hear and what I like is not necessarily what the next person, let's say, had the same skill level that I had, may like something totally different. So it's like if you're a painter and someone comes in and goes, I like your artwork, I want to buy your painting. It's more like that. It's like I like what I see when you make a violin. I like what you're doing there, and I want to have a violin from you.
Do you hear that? It's so pretty, like the echo of it.
I always say the technology I work on peaked in 1705. They're not set for improvement. They're not like other technological things like phones or cars that actually improve with technology. Violins don't improve with technology so much. They just, because they're already great. But it is kind of a tool. It's an extension of you. The violin sounds like a human voice. That's why it's so compelling.
Next week, how the clothes you wear for special occasions connects us to our history in ways that go beyond fashion. Plus, bringing history to life through the art of storytelling. Thanks for watching Spotlight. Join us next Sunday at 9:30 a.m. on KPLR 11.